Hi, here's Florian with a new podcast guest. So I would say introduce yourself.
Christoph Magnussen. I'm the CEO and founder of Blackboard, and I'm co-host in the On the Way to New Work podcast. And I have to add, by heart, I'm a filmmaker. I have a YouTube channel. That's my true passion, even if we're a small YouTube channel. But yeah, that's what I do.
So how did you become a podcaster? How did you become a filmmaker?
That's a story. I studied business in St. Gallen, Switzerland, and started the first job in Wiesbaden, consulting. And I still remember that I was quite frustrated in the consulting, and my boss, who was also my mentor, at a certain point, I stumbled upon the very first, one of the very first inspirational videos on YouTube in 2006. That was the amendment speech by Steve Jobs, who said, "Follow your heart and your intuition." And then the next day I told my boss, "Oh, Jochen, I'm going to quit." And he's like, "What? Why do you do that?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to start my own business." That's how I started a business. But the journey was not as straight as planned. So 2 other startups in between. One is still alive with very good people, 150 people, who make a tremendous job. But I stepped out of the managing director role and started Blackboard. 10 years in between, up and down with all the stuff as an entrepreneurial roller coaster. At a certain point, we stumbled into this new way of working thing with tools, which I did on YouTube. But from these YouTube videos, a podcast arose because Michael, my podcast partner, and I were on the way to New York to talk about new work. And I made a typo, being a dyslexic, in the subtitles. And then the podcast afterwards was called On the Way to New Work, instead of the subtitles On the Way to New York, which we originally wanted to have. That's how I became a podcaster.
So the first company you founded, what was it about?
The very first one was a catering business.
Okay.
Back in school, and actually quite profitable, because it was a business partner of mine, Annalena, and I, who managed a group of people, like up to 30 people, organizing catering for car dealers, architect offices, and stuff like that. And since my dad had a beer trading business, I always knew when someone had to open a new shop or something, and I was always offering. And they were super happy with young male and female waiters who came from school but didn't do it as a real job. So they were all very passionate with the job. So that was the first business. And then we started a event business, Carpe Noctem, that's how it's called, with Alexander Graf, who's the CEO of Spryker. He was my very first real business partner, real meaning there was a company behind it. And we were organizing events. That was a good time, also back in school. And I thought oh, I make money with that, so that's an easy way. And then my mom said, "Oh, that's good. If you make your own money, then we can inherit everything to your brother." So and I said, okay, then maybe I go studying. And then I started. I said I want to do something different. I didn't do it topic-wise. Today I would study a different topic, but I went to St. Gallen, and I'm from Kiel originally. To me, it was a long distance, so that's how I ended up studying in St. Gallen. So that was the beginning. And after St. Gallen, I started a company with a guy who met at the university on the first day, Adrian Locher, also quite successful entrepreneur, I have to say, much more successful than I am, and a great guy, a good soul as well. And we started a, what would you call it, ambassador marketing business, one of the very first ambassador marketing businesses. And our lucky punch was that we brought Mark Zuckerberg to Germany. So we helped Facebook to launch in Germany in 2008, and then wanted to start bringing that ambassador business to the digital world, so for social media. But we were 4 years too early for Facebook marketing and stuff like that. There were companies after us coming that are much more successful. We were too early with that.
How did you got the deal to help Facebook to launch in Germany?
Back then, Facebook wasn't that big. I mean, it was big. It was big. It was big in the startup scene. So you knew they were 4 years on the market. You knew, okay, something is happening. And if you remember StudiVZ back then, they had so-called campus captains. That was a concept. And this concept of you use an influencer in a certain target group, we were using in the party business before. With Alexander Graf and I, we had a network in Kiel of people who we gave the tickets for the parties we were organizing and say, hey, you can sell the ticket. You get 50, I think back then it was pence, share in every sold ticket. But the more important thing is you can choose who should come. Yeah. And with that, we always had enough pre-sale before a party to actually be break even. So this concept came to our ambassador concept. So we had students at different universities using their laptops as an advertising screen, showing that they are ambassador for a certain brand. And we did that with different brands.
You did a sticker on a laptop? And
laptop, t-shirts, stuff like that. So with Debitel, Freenet, Debitel, Mobilcom, we did a campaign where you could actually buy SIM cards at the students. So they were hosts for that. And Facebook, the right hand of Mark, Javier Olivan, still a very successful Facebook manager, he gave me a phone call. I was on vacation, and I received a call saying, "Yeah, I'm here from Facebook, blah blah blah." And I was at first, okay, that's a joke. But he actually found out about that. We have students, and someone told him you should talk to these guys. This is how we ended up with. And cool. The bad thing is that we couldn't manage to negotiate shares into that because all the share deals were over. He told me by then, so we were paid in actual money, not in shares.
Yeah, quite a bad luck. If I remember right, StudiVZ had a similar, like I think the founders also had originally a social network for parties as well in the area of Mannheim, if I remember correctly. So they were kind of in the same space. So it seems like the party network or students network is like a good network to start something like that. Because Facebook started also the universities originally. Interesting. Yeah. So the cycle closes again, and then you did the event agency or like this ambassador network on the side during your studies, right?
The actual agency that was after the studies. So the party business was before that, before that, and then I studied 3 years or something like that. Which was like quite absorbing, very intense studies. And then I went to my first job, I think for a year or a year and a half, and then kicked off this idea of building brand ambassador network. We stopped that in 2009 when the crisis hit in the advertising industry. We were like too small to actually go through that, so we stripped everything down. One of my leading employees stayed with the company. He's now managing director at Blackboard, so also quite a while. I went on to join a company for refurbishment, which started in refurbishing electronics, especially phones. I knew the model from the States, and I knew it can grow very fast if you have the operations right. And even if I'm a creative by heart, people know me as the very strict operations guy, using cloud tools to optimize processes, being super strict on communication internally, especially with tools. So the founder, Chris Wolf, asked me if I would join the founding team to help scale, because back then we were like 20 people or not even. And today we're 150 in that company, 150 something. We grew it from like under $1 million to like 32, 33 when I left, and it's even bigger now, much bigger now. But there was like super fast turning refurbishment business with a lot of learnings in between there. And from that, Blackboard started because I was using these cloud tools also back then with my first company, with Salesforce very early on and stuff like that. That's how Blackboard then grew out of that.
Cool. So you as a scaling expert, how I learned now, what would you say were like your 3 biggest key points to scale an organization? You said already tools, so can you elaborate a bit?
I wouldn't say I'm the scaling expert. That company scaled. I would say scale happens sometimes very fast. There is this new book from Reid Hoffman, I think he calls it blitzscaling in his book.
Yeah.
I'm very critic with that. Once I don't like the name because I think the association is really bad in history. But that's okay. I can live with that. But the idea of scaling for the sake of scaling, I think, is very dangerous. What, of course, is the idea is that you're big enough to dominate a market. I don't see size as the main factor. It's so easy for people to just measure in size because we learned it, like in numbers and stuff like that.
Let me redefine it. Like how I scaling define is that scaling in the ideal world is driven by the market. So you not scale because you want to scale.
Yeah.
You get such a demand inside your company that you need to scale to keep up with it. And then you get this pain automatically because you need to kind of provide more of your services, even if it was not meant to be from that in the beginning in this amount of.
I would say that was just that one company, the refurbishment company, that had such a demand from the market to scale. The other one's too slow, and now I could say the other business models are not successful or not. Let's talk about the scaling part then. To me, the scaling is people-driven. So I was using tools. For example, back then G Suite, back then Google Apps, how it was called, because it was the only cloud platform, putting everything that is not part of the core business to the cloud, which is standard today, but like 10, 12 years ago, people were saying, oh, you're nuts, or even further ago, and helping people to use it in the most efficient way. This is still not happening these days. So if a company goes to Office 365 or G Suite or even Slack, people think, oh, I can use it, it's so easy, but people just don't use it in the right way. Even WhatsApp is used in the wrong way sometimes, like when you have groups that don't stop communicating, or you don't have a group for a certain reason, or stuff like that. Simple stuff. So I was always focusing on how can these tools help us to scale, and communication to me is one of the key parts of scaling, because the larger you get, the thing that we've seen, for example, I was measuring in the background the amount of communication in Google Apps, in documents and mails, and you could see plateaus. So with 20 people you had a plateau, and then it kicked off to 60 people, and then you had another plateau. And so communication expands not exponentially, but in like close to exponential manners. And I said, like, this is super dangerous, because we die because people just don't talk, or don't get the things right, or are not transparent enough. So that was what I was looking for, helping people to use it in the right way, and establishing tools in a way that they force you to open up more automatically. And we talk about pre-Slack time. So there was no group messaging tools. You had to kind of build that up. And you can do that with an email as well, like using group mails instead of just one mail, but you need more stricter rules. And this is how my scaling experience went. So with the same amount of people, a better amount of communication, better information flow, and with that, more profit, more money.
How did you motivate people to communicate more, to open up more?
I give them the background. Like with Blackboard, we live that now. I wanted to find a company after my refurbishment company that lives that has it built in the DNA. So here we teach it to other companies, and we live it. But I had to do a lot of workshops, and I did them all by myself. Like I was so convinced that it's so important that I explained people, see, if you communicate in an asynchronous way, so let's say in written or reading, you need much better stuff like transparent channels to like see what is happening, and it will help every one of us. But the training I provided back then is, okay, how do you deal with criticism in a public channel? When do you take it offline? When do you say in the channel, hey, let's synchronize in order to get that conflict out of this channel and stuff like that? So that was what the training was focusing on, not on this is a button and there you can upload a file. So this is what's still happening at many companies today, who implement these tools and think with the tool it will change. It won't.
Would you say it's better that like people can moderate the channels themselves, or would you say it's better the CEO does moderation, or would you say it's better to have like some dedicated people for that, communication officers? I don't know how you want to call them. What would you say is the best experience if you say it's mainly about being aware of if something goes wrong?
definitely depends. I know it's a stupid answer, but it definitely depends. It's like from company culture, it comes from policies you have in the company, from willingness of the leadership team. You definitely need someone on top who really pushes it, ideally manages it, but even like we have 30 people and I don't have the chance to manage that anymore.
Yeah.
Like with 30 people, you need someone who's dedicated, and you want to build it as part of your culture. You want to establish it as an everyday attitude that the people live. So you can set up certain tools in a way that people get used to it more and more. So one simple example, we have the same syntax for folders and files that we have in client projects in Google Drive as we have as Slack channels. So it's very easy as a new person to like see what is connected in both worlds. Another example, we have a very simple emergency rule. It comes from this urban legend of having a red phone between the Kremlin and the White House, between Moscow and Washington, which is an urban legend. In the real life, we have Twitter, as we learned. But the idea is good, like saying, I pick up the phone and say, hey, I didn't shoot the rockets. So we call it the 2 times call rule. So whenever someone calls you twice, whoever it is, it's an emergency. Yeah. You signal, this is an emergency, call me back right away. Or pick up the phone when you see it the second time. So if I would sit in a podcast now, it's like my phone is off, but if someone would call me 2 times, I know it's an emergency. And we talk about then an emergency, let's say life or death situation, someone erased YouTube channel, I don't know, something like that. So this is, this is more, so we believe more in certain rules that give you guidance, that help you, not single person. It depends on how the company is structured, of who should have responsibility for that. But it should become part of the culture, definitely.
If you would say like that you should do as much as possible online or like in a shared space, and also as transparent as possible, do you have the issue that like stuff gets too complicated, too much data, too much information, it's too hard to dig through it, or is this not an issue?
There's this great invention in the year 2019, it's called search. And I always have to promote that because people then say, hey, we know that. And I ask, do you have folders in your email? And then say, yeah, of course, I have folders to put the project mates. And I said, that's bullshit. Like, these folders are for nothing. Yeah, but I need to find stuff. Bullshit. You didn't even try to use the search in a proper way. So with the modern cloud tools, let's say G Suite, I mean, Google invented the web search, not invented, but like, the modern search. Even with Microsoft Office 365, you have a tool called Delve, where artificial intelligence helps you to like sort the stuff in the background. And if you use the web browser for the mail instead of the client that you're used to with Outlook, then you have much better search power. So I'd say I don't sort anything anymore. We have certain project folders, but I just search for stuff. Photos, videos, files, everything. And we upload every bit of video we record. And I tell you, we are recording videos with a RAD, which is 5K. So if we film for 1 day, we have 1 to 2 terabyte data per day. And we can search it. It works.
Then I have another question. Like my experience with search, it's kind of frustrating. So if you know there should be something, and you're trying to find the right keywords, and you're looking through it, and it's a typical, like it doesn't matter if you use Google or Evernote. Like if it's not there in the next 5 hits, you have to choose to go the several pages down, try different keywords, but you're just digging into a big pile of data. I tried to make a solution for that in one of the startups, but like it was too difficult. But how do you solve this issue?
I write a very nasty comment in Slack to everyone. Where's this fucking file? And then someone sends me a screencast how he is searching with just another word and finds it in a second. So it backfires to me. So usually it's me. Searching for the wrong keyword, not looking at the right spot. Lately, there have been issues in the Google search and Drive, but we are a small Google partner. But from social media, we have such a reach that they listen. Hopefully, in this case, and they are aware of that. And same as Microsoft, they're constantly evolving their tools, and it's how do you use it. So one example, if you're a G Suite user, you should use the cloud search, which is laying above the G Suite because it searches calendar, mail, and everything at the same time. The Drive search is poor compared to that. If you are a Microsoft user, you definitely want to work with Delph. If you're an admin, don't shut it off. If you were the data protection officer in the company, read what it is and see what's the potential behind it. Search and not foldering stuff away is important these days to focus on the core job. And also for inspiration, I sometimes just scroll through the feed of documents that I worked on in the company to see like what is actually going on. Yeah. And that's really helpful.
So the next tip is to try to focus on like one operating system, like one kind of cloud, because it's hard probably to combine Drive and Microsoft there and then Evernote there. Probably your next tip would be decide for one of the sites. It's probably kind of similar anyway. I'm
always very radical in what I do. So I uploaded everything I have to the cloud 10 years ago already and live off that. So my Drive is pretty large. So we call it the core office tool. You need something that is at the core of the company. Let's say you're a sales-based company, then Salesforce could be the core tool and is a non-negotiable. If you're a very communicative-driven company, like we are, very collaborative, G Suite may be the right tool, or Office 365. Many agencies have both, though, because they work for clients and the clients tell them to do it. But way too many companies say, oh, we need that because, and end up with what we call a lost in the cloud setup. So many tools and not clear rules how to use them. And that's horrific because we have different tools running. I don't use all of them in the company. I use the core tools. I focus on the core tools. I rely on the core tools. And this really makes my day a lot less stressful.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, in the hard German market, there's quite a concern to put all your data to American servers, to Google itself. Even if they say our servers are in Europe, it's still an American company. Do you see any European or German alternative to Google G Suite or to Microsoft's Office 365?
No. Okay, so to elaborate a little bit more, we have to be clear here. I'm aware of GDPR and everything. We prepared our clients years ago before it happened. We said publicly that Microsoft won't keep up the strategy with the service just in Germany because the big advantage of the cloud is the fragmented way you can store your data. There is no, I would like from everyday use, of course, many big players try it with own service and they're getting better, that's for sure. But on a way that you improve communication and collaboration, there are the two big players, G Suite and Office 365. Clearly, Lotus Notes is not even coming close. Many others are just like solutions for one thing. Dropbox is making an interesting part of it. We are here again not talking about the German company. So there is no player local based can doing that. And we have also to say that the big tech countries are the States and China. Alibaba is coming with a service. WingSeen is important as a chat service. So would you put your stuff to a Chinese server or to a US server?
How is it called, the Chinese service, the chat service?
WingSeen, WeChat.
WeChat is the Chinese name of WeChat. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, WeChat's definitely pretty interesting to see what you can do with a chat program. But I would like to go back to your study time because you're like quite an entrepreneurial person, so you had quite some experience and you studied in business. Would you say it was worth the time? Did you still use what you learned in your studies? What would you say to that?
I would. I wasn't brave enough to do something else. I'm much more creative than I allowed myself to be. And you definitely don't need business studies to do business. I just had a podcast guest who studied psychology and learned everything. He's an entrepreneur, so he did everything for his business on the go, and you can definitely do that. So What the studies was worth for in St. Gallen was the very good people I met, still closest friends today, an extremely, extremely good and very intelligent group of people, and that helps a lot. A good network, and I was working on the side all the time, organizing stuff, doing stuff, and I still see value in allowing yourself to broaden the studies, to do something completely different. And the difficulty we have, especially in Germany, is that we want to have the answer to, okay, I study this and my job will be that, which is bullshit.
Especially in a world which changes rapidly, and we don't know what will still be valid or not. There's some hints we could see, but it's definitely not studying business, probably more going into social areas. Then after your studies, you worked for advisory. Why did you do that? Like, also you coming from the entrepreneurial background, why did you say, let's go to a consultancy company?
I would say, even if it looks like that I'm a very brave, hard, clear character, I would say I have a very soft and sentimental side, and it's quite easy to that I am also impressed with stuff, and I was insecure of like what doing. I didn't know what exactly, and I would say I'm not the best founder, definitely not. There are much better founders out there. And I would say my core is much more something creative, but not being a founder. So I wasn't on the founding trip that early. I found it interesting. But my mentor back then, he said, hey, why don't you have a look then? And you can look in the company, and that was the deal, in a different way than a normal consultant. Yeah. So I show you the background, how it's run, and then said, okay, that's interesting. I'm not doing a normal consulting job here. So that's why.
Why you're not the best founder? What would you say do you miss to be the best possible founder?
Maybe it's bullshit to say it. I'm too hard in judgment about myself. By heart I'm a creative. By heart I'm a creative. I love to be on the stage. I love the videos we make. I love that. I love the podcast. I love producing. I love creating. And I would say not founders, I would say leaders. There are much better leaders out there. People who are, who lead their company in a different way. I let go many times, which is good in new work ages when you have to let go more. I'm very good in letting go. And then at the same time, I'm very strict with certain things. So sometimes I'm very clearly, still people would say I'm a natural leader. But I'm super critic with myself and saying like there are much better leaders out there. And what would it be? Better in keeping up with a certain routine, better in giving guidance sometimes. The leadership style I have is much different from what you would say as a good leader. But if you would define a leader as someone who has followers, I would say I'm a leader. I definitely have followers in the company and around. And I take the responsibility, but I try to be self-aware enough to see like, okay, is it good, is it bad? Like, what do I do right now?
By the way, the only thing which decides if you're a good leader are your people which you lead. If they say you're a good leader, you're a good leader. Which things you are strict about? You said here some things you're loose, some things you're strict. Which things you're loose, which things you're strict?
I'm very strict when it comes to communication in terms of like the tool use and stuff like that to find the stuff. I usually don't forget stuff or sleep in or stuff like that. So I'm very strict on these like process oriented things, meetings on the day. If I have a meeting, I have a meeting. I don't skip it. I'm loose about routines. I set up certain routines in companies. So at Verkaufens, for example, the refurbishment company, we had a management routine, which we stuck to like every week, same time, same agenda, super strict. But in my heart, I'm like, oh, I could sit in the cafe an hour longer and use that for thinking, which I these days think is much more important. Like this morning, I used the time to reflect a little bit and prepare the day. And now we're in the day and we run through it and it goes so fast that I don't have room to think. And so that's, for example, last week I had a some time, and I felt like, okay, now it's getting difficult in my head. So I took the car and drove out of Hamburg and actually took a long walk through the woods to use that for thinking, reflecting, refreshing, however you want to call it. To me, this is work.
It's probably also the another question, like how you keep the work-life balance. And I know you would say, hey, I do what I love, so why do I separate there? But then it's another point how you said, like, how do you know to stop the train, to take the break?
Yeah.
Because it also makes too much fun to run the train. So how do you know, or how do you handle this whole thing, work-life balance, and know how to do breaks and something?
I don't. I have 2 kids. If I don't work, I have the kids. And where's the time for myself? It's very limited at the moment. But I learned 2 things. Number 1 is to not give certain phases in my life an end date. No matter if it's a crisis or if it's a good time. We tend to give, let's say it's a crisis, and then we think, in 6 weeks the year's over, and then next year starts. Bullshit, the same stuff is happening the next day after New Year's. And from a psychological perspective, this is really bad, because we think stuff's going to change at a certain point. Instead of accepting the way how it is right now, I made it this way, and I have to live with that right now. And I can decide every day which way I want to go. That's number 1 thing. And the second thing is, I learned over the course of the last 10 years or 12 years that doing what I like and doing what I really want are different things, much different things. So there are days when I don't like the stuff we do right now, because it's hard with the videos, I have stress with some of my people, nasty comments, however you want to call it. But what wakes me up and keeps me going is that I realize it's not difficult to make one podcast, one video and stuff like that, but to keep that going. And that's the difference between doing what you like and doing what you want. And that's a very important decision to make, and it took me a long time to learn that.
Cool. I can recommend you the book The War of Art from Stephen Pressfield. It's also really interesting he talks about to be a creative, it doesn't mean you only work when you feel like doing it. To be creative means you work no matter what. And the first point you said, it's interesting because I would say the opposite answer. If you would ask me this question, I would say sometimes, especially in hard situations, and it's going on, and you fight for your life. What helped me was to set a certain date and said, I want to have solved this until this date. Otherwise, I take off. I shut it down. So
that's an interesting perspective, but that's psychologically. What you do then is when you say, if you do, let's say we put it black and white. Let's say you put a date.
Yeah.
And it's not solved. Because with saying I solve it, you have the feeling you can solve it. Yeah, let's say it's raining today, but I need to record a video. How would you solve that? You can't. And I think we tend to bullshit ourselves too often by saying we can influence certain things on the outside, but we can't. We cannot influence anything in our lives. Nothing. We can only influence how we react to it or how we respond to it. That's what we can influence. Of course, I run a company, I do the stuff, but seriously, that's a bunch of people doing what they want. Yeah. Ideally, they work in the same direction. I can be lucky every day. Yeah. So I could turn it the other way around and say, every day it works kind of fine. I could wake up and say, wow, it's still working. Crazy. Yeah. Let's have a party about that, and not freaking out if it's not working, because not working is actually the default. And that's why I think it's so dangerous to put then an end date and say I solved it, because then the primal brain kicks in and says, do I need to fight or flight now from this? And I personally have no good experience at all if I get to fight or flight mode for myself. Fighting is really bad. You don't want to have me fighting against you. Definitely not. Flying away is even worse for me, because I really pull myself out of everything, communication and everything. So let's say if that's something very personal, then I'm gone. I blend that out, and psychologically, this is really bad for me and for you and for everyone involved. So that's why I say, whatever we are in right now, and it's hard to put that into practice, I agree. Whatever we're in right now, let's say a bad phase in the company, is a tough phase, and I have to make everything work to like get through it. But having in mind that on Christmas Eve this thing is solved, which is then 6 weeks from now, for example, let me wakes up on the first Christmas day, one day after that, and saying, "Fuck, it's not solved," and then we tend to fall into depression and everything. And we know from psychology it's really bad for people to do that, health-wise as well.
So to give some more my side to the story, it's definitely the moment is there, and it never makes sense to resist the moment. So Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, it's like doesn't make sense at all. But if you like work in a company side and like you build it up from the scratch, so like you're the boss of Siemens, and like at the end it doesn't matter, but like you build it up, it's your baby, and you grow it, and you have a vision for it. You have the hard point that like the day-to-day stuff, sure, there's no way to resist it. Yeah. Just go with it and try your best. It works or it doesn't work. But at the end, you have to decide in the long run, can you pivot another time? Or is it at the end a dead horse? Because if it's a dead horse, you should get off the dead horse. But probably you could pivot until the end of your day if you want to. So it's probably not like it's probably harder to do in a creative business, because in creative business there's like no real goal at the end. But if you're in a certain business area,
but the same is true for But I get your point. And I'm not good in saying when's a good time. Sometimes I'm really good and keep going, and it's good to keep going. And sometimes I'm bad and keep going, and it would have been good to keep going. So that's what I meant with I'm not a good leader. There are certain people who realize much earlier it's a dead horse. But the question is, what is good and what is bad? And that's a judgment. And if you're on the judgment side, and you read Eckhart Tolle, and he's absolutely right, then you're on your ego that is judging. So, for example, if someone says, yeah, but he's not successful, I say, like, how do you find success? He didn't sell his company. Like, bullshit, fuck you. Come on. Like, where's that success compared to what many other people do all day long? Making good money, growing the companies, putting something good to the world, or not even having a company and doing something good to the world and making a change. Because all these great companies out there, including my company and many other large corporations, how long will they exist?
Exactly.
And we're not talking about some end of the universe ages. We're talking about like 100 years, 200 years, and whatever. So I would definitely be a bit more humble as an entrepreneur. And the big shots that I met are usually very humble about that. Knowing there is so much luck involved to make that punch they have made. And many who try to repeat that, calling themselves serial entrepreneurs, some of them are successful, defining success as founding another company. Some have a hard time to get that going, but there's one lucky punch that some people made, very hard to make. And in the creative world, even worse. Being the Rolling Stones or Rammstein or whoever on stage continuously. And they are usually from their followership, from the influence, from the feeling the people are out there. So but that's my philosopher side in myself. So that's, as I said, the more creative Christoph.
How would you say that you define the new work?
Very clearly as a work, as Fridtjof Bergman said, that you really, really want to do, because work can become the thing that makes you stronger instead of weaker. If you find something that you really, really want to do, it really can give you contribution to your health and everything. And if not the job itself is it, then you can use technology to organize that better, to work less, and then spend a third of your time doing what you really, really want. If you need money to like do that, actually, for example.
And to make you stronger, you mean gives you energy, or how would you define it makes you stronger?
It stronger in terms of a character, a person, healthier, everything. Because I mean, we work a large amount of our time, and if we think, at a certain point I stop working, it's bullshit. It gives us identity. We love working too much to give it up. So you better find something that you really want to do. where you like leave work in the evenings and like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do.
And then another question for the work-life balance. So how do you balance it out with your family? Because work is, especially if you found your new work, your family is probably still important. So how do you balance that out?
Work in progress. It's blending. My kids are small, so it's difficult to like take them along at certain points. It's hard for me because I travel a lot. So my wife and I have to like find ways to organize that and make that work. That both can also have a fulfilling work and family life. But if I spend time with my kids, and definitely you could say it's not more than others have, but it's a lot more than many other entrepreneurs do that I know, then I try to like really dedicate that time to the kids and like do not communicate in that time on the phone, just have the 2 times call rule and stuff like that.
Yeah. It reminds me on like, because you said like they're not old enough to bring along. It reminds me that like, I think he must have 12 kids or something, like crazy number. Crazy. And then he said like, yeah, and then I bring him to a rocket factory. And they're so bored. They're not really interested. And all other kids in his mind would like go crazy there in a rocket factory.
No, they want their dad.
Yeah.
That's what they want. They want their dad.
So how did you explore the topic new work in general?
We learn from people. I listen and learn from experts how they define it. It has a very strict definition, as I said, but talking to people, you can see how everyone sees it a bit different, and that helps really to like look at it from all different angles. If it's a psychologist, if it's a neuroscientist, if it's an entrepreneur, if it's a CEO, everyone sees it a bit different. And I'm not the inventor of that. I'm just one of the voices together with Michael to like bring that into the world. I would say I'm the strict voice and telling people, sorry, but fruit bowls, home office and open office spaces is not new work. Yeah. That's a good thing, but it's not new work.
So, okay, like you said already what new work is, would you say there are any downsides to it or any things which make it problematic?
I was criticized in press for the question I would leave open, that how should a world look like where everyone does what he wants to do, which is in German saying like du machst, was du willst, which is not true for what new work is. You make your mind up about what you really, really want to do. How do you want to contribute? If more people would ask that question, definitely more people would leave their current job or reduce it to a certain amount and do something else. We're not brave enough many times to do that. A world that is much braver, and not everyone runs crazy after that. Not everyone becomes an entrepreneur, so don't worry. There are many people who are happy with their job. There are also many people working by the book and are happy with that and use the other spare time to do something they really, really want. And this does not necessarily need to mean that everyone needs to become, I don't know, a social entrepreneur or stuff like that. Bullshit. Not everyone is made for that. But it would mean you have a much more honest work environment, a healthier work environment, because people made up their mind and say what they think and how they want to work. And you would challenge stupidity in the workplace. And you have so much stupidity going on in small. You have stupid tools that don't work, sometimes stupid processes, or a meeting. You sit in a meeting with so many people and you ask yourself the question like, why am I here in this meeting? And you're not allowed to ask this question, which is a pink elephant in the room. Why? Yeah. So I would say the downsides, what are the downsides there? Like, it's not a philosophy in saying everyone needs to work agile now, or everyone needs to wear sneakers instead of a suit. Bullshit. If you like to wear a suit, wear a suit. I don't give a shit. Then do it. And if the company says, this is the way we are, we wear suits, then don't join the company and ask for sneakers. I mean, then you joined the wrong company. If the company doesn't like home office, many companies don't do it because they like the communication at the office. Don't join the company if you want to make home office. I mean, so that's, to me, I would say there are a lot of upsides and a lot of potential, and we just made the first steps to a more honest work environment.
So probably you support quite highly the bedingungsloses Grundeinkommen. I don't know the English word.
No.
Because out of my guessing, it would lead to exactly that. Because if you have the money off the table, the main money to survive, you can think more about what you want to do with your time, and that would probably lead to something which brings benefit to the society.
I don't believe so. I like the idea. I like the idea of it because it gives you certain security. But of course, there are people who would take it and work nothing because they're not motivated. But where does this not motivation come from? There is a deeper reason underneath it. And there are other examples, like the UAE, for example. With Abu Dhabi, you have a country where I think people can live a couple of 100 years without working just a single day because they have so much money. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. Of course, it's another extreme because you have to work. I like the idea that you have the basic needs always safe and secure. But the deeper issue is in our psychology of how we see the world. In a country that is more positive than Germany, for example, you most likely would take the bedingungslose Grundeinkommen much more as a solid base and operate from there. I think I would say it's very difficult to establish it here. We tend to make too many plans of the future and want to have security left and right, and then we would find the next issue. Let's say it's not enough or whatever.
It's interesting. Like my solution for that problem, what you say is like that people are like not motivated to do anything. I would teach the people in school to learn to find what they're passionate about. And I would probably let the school system how it is because it's difficult to change. Like people would kill you. I would just make how you say this hobby classes as forced that you need to do this as student, and the school needs to provide them in a quite big variety, similar to the US a bit because they have it as well. So you can do guitar lessons, you can play chess, you can play soccer, whatever you want. And the only thing which is forced is that you need to provide results. Soccer team needs to go on a tournament and win there. The chess thing needs to organize a chess tournament. The art guys need to make an art exhibition and so on. So you learned to work for something at the end and produce something in a team or alone. And you can always change, like you need to do it for, 6 months and then you can change. But this would teach people to think for themselves, create something for themselves and learn something for themselves. And this would probably motivate people a bit more to, if they would have more free time to do something sense with it. Would be interesting to see what happens if you put this in Abu Dhabi and if maybe they have it already and you could prove that's the wrong way. I don't know. That's just an idea in my head how it could work.
Changing the school system is a tough cookie, but I would go a bit before that and ask myself, like, why do people not come into school with that experience? And that's the responsibility we as parents have. And I have to ask myself, how much time do I provide to my kids to actually also just see them and see who is that person. Of course, they mirror adults and do what adults do, but at a certain point they develop, of course, their own personality, and we tend to put them in certain directions. Oh, now learning English and another instrument, instead of letting them play and explore and see, and then helping that to grow, to flourish after they have their basis at home. So I would say this is stuff we can change today, right away. I know how hard it is. I have kids. I know how hard it is to provide the time. I know how hard it is to put my own parents away. Really tough. But that's the big opportunity we have, and we have to take that responsibility. We cannot give that to the school system or someone else. I agree. I would love an experiment like that. I'm not afraid of stuff like that, but changing that is a tough cookie.
Yeah. That's the reason why I would just set it on top and not change the school system itself. Even, how you said, it's a tough cookie, and have some interesting books and articles about it, and probably many more people will fail in changing it. So you said like you learn mainly from podcast guests. And what would you say were like your most interesting guests you learned the most?
Way too many interviews. I mean, we did, I think, beyond 170 podcasts and 300 videos in the last 3 years. So many. Just interviewed Leon Winscheid, super interesting guy, young entrepreneur, psychologist originally. Learned a lot from him just right now. Warren Rustand, still one of my top favorite podcasts. Dandapani, good friend from New York, former monk. Many different ones. Very hard to say. The best things are always related to like how you deal with fear, how you leave your comfort zone. Like Philip Bergman is also a good episode. And to realize that there is no straight line and that everyone has his or her story in a very individual way, and like even accepting this story as your life is one of the most important learnings. Hard thing to do.
To summarize. Yeah. Cool. Then I always like to ask the question, what are your favorite books? Which books you would recommend?
My number one read is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
That's always my number one recommendation, I have to say. I read, but since I'm a father, I didn't read the last years too much, I have to admit. I love to read a lot. I read a lot of Seneca in the old days. I also love the book Walden from Henry David Thoreau. So I have the extremes in myself, extreme technology, but also extreme nature, and reducing everything to the minimum. That's good. Let me think and go through the younger Kindle books I have. 4 Agreements, The 4 Agreements, very good one. Could sum them up, and it would be enough. But the book is good as well. It's simple, very simple 4 agreements to be aware of the impeccable of your word. Never take anything personal. Never make assumptions, and always do your best. And there's a book about that. Very good read.
It's not only 3. There's 4 more.
No, the first is the impeccable of your word.
Okay.
Be impeccable with your word.
Okay.
Always do your best. Never make assumptions. Never take anything personally. Would be book recommendations.
And my last question I'd like to ask: if you could go back in time to your 18 or 20-year-old self and tell him something, what would you tell him?
Yeah, study your filmmaking thing, or think of something more creative than studying business. But enjoy. I would tell my 18-year-old self, enjoy life. Life is not that serious. Enjoy it.
And would you tell something different to your older self, like to your, let's say, 30-year-something self?
Look on your life and accept it as your life, with every up and down, seeing the colors and contrast, the mountains and the valleys, with the same gratitude.
Nice last words. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions.